Hello, everybody. Today we have our guest, Diego Granados, product manager at Microsoft. Diego has several years of experience working as a product manager at Cisco and Microsoft, and several other companies where he was a BI developer. Diego is a MBA from Duke University, also originated from Mexico City, and now resides in Seattle, Washington, working for Microsoft. Diego, we would love to hear a little bit more about you. So what else have you been up to?
Yeah, thanks so much, Vivek, and thanks for inviting me here. And hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Like you said, I work at Microsoft as a product manager right now. And for everybody out there who's a gamer, I don't work in Xbox, but I do work in machine learning models, which is pretty cool. And one of my favorite perks about being at Microsoft or being at Microsoft is that I get to test sometimes some of the new cool stuff that Xbox is doing. And as much as I would love to talk about it, I can't, but it's really, really cool.
All right. So we are not talking about Xbox and games today, but we are talking about product management, which a lot of people are very curious about. What is product management? So Diego, let's just start with there. So how do you view product management?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that you can find out there about product management. And some of the most typical things that you can hear about it is that product managers are these mini CEOs of a product, or that product managers are in the middle of customers, technology, and business. But in reality, product management depends on so many other things. It's not the same to be a PM at a startup versus a large company versus a software or hardware product. So it really, really, really depends on so many factors. But at a high level, product managers, we are the storytellers in the group. We are the connection between all the different parties that come together to solve the customer problem. That's our number one priority. And yes, product managers, we set the vision, we set the strategy, we create roadmaps and backlogs and talk to customers all the time. And we also have to talk about, different business languages. Like we talk geek, we talk data scientists, we talk business intelligence, finance, marketing, and so many other things that you can think of. But the number one thing, like I said, is about the customer. So we have to talk customer. We have to understand their problems. And going back to the definitions that I talked about, one thing that I really don't like about saying that we're the mini CEOs is I've never been a CEO, but I imagine that as a CEO, you have a lot of people reporting to you and you can tell them what to do. As a product manager, you don't have anyone reporting to you. So it's really about influencing others. And that's where your storytelling and being data driven and gathering all the evidence and talking with customers is going to help you convince people to align to your vision and solve the customer problem.
Nice. So you give us a lot. So you look seems like you do a lot of things. So however, I want to know, Diego, like what time do you start? And when you go to office, like when do you get coffee? And what do you do after you get coffee? Who do you talk to? Like I want the details, like on a day-to-day basis. I'm really curious. What do you do as a product manager?
Yeah, at a high level, product managers, we have to answer three questions. We have to answer, what are we building? Why are we building it? And when is it going to be delivered?
Mm-hmm.
All of this after coffee at 9 o'clock. But in
Okay,
reality,
9 o'clock.
at 9 o'clock, no, but in reality, I just want to make this as a very, very um, thoughtful answer.
Mm-hmm.
Product managers, yes, like you said, we do work a lot, we interact with a lot of people, but that doesn't
Mm-hmm.
mean that the work has to be 24/7, even weekends. It's not about
Yeah,
that, right?
yeah,
Because in the end,
yeah.
we also depend on other people, so we can't be bugging our team at 2 in the morning unless something is super critical, something is exploding over there. We can't do that. So we work some regular hours, and it's a lot about communication with others. Now, I mentioned the three questions, right? What, why, and when. But
Mm-hmm.
we have to go deeper than that, and it will depend a lot on the stage or of the development, on the stage of the product. Like for example, when we talk about the ideation, we're just starting the project. We need to do interviews, surveys, talk to customers, gather the feedback, and
Mm-hmm.
we spend a lot of time talking with them. But when we start prototyping, then we have to do our research. We have to plan our roadmap. We have to have that
Mm-hmm.
high level agreement with different teams. So it's a different conversation with different people. but then we get into development, and now engineering comes into play, or data scientists, and we need to talk
Mm-hmm.
about backlogs and
Mm-hmm.
prioritization and develop continuous feedback. And we even talk to finance to say, hey, yes, this is actually, a good business for us. Then we come
Mm-hmm.
into testing, getting with customers, and finally launching. And that's where we start getting involved with more people like marketing, compliance, getting customer feedback, gather telemetry, improve the product. And it's just a cycle. So there's no typical day today to product management, but it's after coffee, it's time to get, things done
Sure.
and talk to everyone.
So that's great. So after coffee, you just seem like you have a lot of meetings and a lot of different developers, other PMs, stakeholders, and throughout the day, you're pretty much just talking to them, understanding the problem, documenting, doing some analysis, preparing for your next meetings. Okay, so I get it. Um, so so you said you do a lot of these things. So what are, if you had to boil down these into
Mhm.
like 4, 5, or 6 skill sets, what are some core skill sets of a product manager?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because it's something that typically when you are thinking of applying to a
Mm-hmm.
product management role, you have to look at those skills, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, the product management role will depending on the company, the product, and so many other
Mm-hmm.
factors. But if I had to select a few of them that at least to me
Mm-hmm.
are the core skills that every product manager should have, I would start with dealing with ambiguity. In your
Mm,
work as a product manager, every day is full of ambiguity, and you're the one who has to drive clarity and has to get those answers for the team. And if you don't have an answer, if you don't know it, make the connection so that whoever needs an answer finds it right
mm-hmm.
away. So it's your
Right.
job to deal with that ambiguity. Another very important skill is working cross-functionally, and this is
Mm,
not just knowing how to work with engineering, which is typically what people think as working cross-functionally, but really is how do you connect what the customer is saying to the marketing language that the folks in marketing need to sell the product, that then goes into the incentives and motivations of the selling team or the partners, that then
mm,
translates into what are we building so that engineering understands the customer problem and why doing A versus B is important, because if we don't do the right thing, then sales cannot go out there. So working cross functionally, it's very important. Others that I can think about is living with influence. Like I said before, it's not about bossing people around, it's convincing them to do something based on the analysis and the research that you did. And
mm-hmm.
other two that I would say are also important is communicating with customers, right? You're gonna get yelled at if something doesn't work, but
Yeah.
customers will also be excited to test your product, and you have to ride that wave and get help from those customers to improve your product. So you have to understand how to communicate with them. And the last one, and this is especially coming from a business intelligence background, I appreciate that a lot, but it's being data driven. Being data
Mm-hmm.
driven means sometimes you need to get your hands dirty, go into the database, get the data that you need to prove a point, and whether that point is developing a new feature, convincing your boss about something or the team about something, you need
Mm-hmm.
data. Product managers,
Mm-hmm.
we don't wake up and say, I want to change the product because I feel like doing it. Is I want
Mm-hmm.
to change the product, and here's all
Mm-hmm.
the evidence of why we should change the product.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And one thing I just thought about is, you seem very passionate about product management. You seem passionate about data. You seem very influential in terms of like when you communicate, which I bet it helps in when you're communicating with data scientists, developers, stakeholders, potential customers. So I see that, and also the ambiguity. So how did you get good at these skill sets? What was your track like?
I think the first time I had a call with a customer, so I was in Mexico and I had
Uh-huh.
my first call with a customer. I was so scared. Like I was so scared of saying the wrong thing, of
Yeah.
thinking like, oh my God, what if, I completely fail at this, the customer is completely mad and the deal is off the table. And after that call, I felt excited. And all I accomplished was, agreeing on a timeline. But to me, it was a huge accomplishment. And the more I
Yeah.
did it, the more it felt natural to me. And the more I started to understand that number one, it was about losing that fear of talking. and as much as you hear me talking now in this awesome podcast, I used to
Mm-hmm.
not like talking that much, but now I do
Wow.
it every day. And the second thing, which I think it's even more important than talking a lot, is empathy. And empathy is, I can't communicate well if I don't understand what the other person is thinking about or feeling or what are their motivations. I cannot talk the same way to an engineer than I do to a sales folks or than I do to a customer or to our research team. I have
Mm-hmm.
to understand. I cannot always be the same person, the same Diego Granados, and talking the same way to everyone on my team. I need to put multiple hats, my engineering hat, my marketing hat, my finance hat, and understand the other person and then talk with them. Those two to me have been key to being able to successfully transmit. And going back to some of the things that I said, product management, we are the storytellers. And
Mm-hmm.
if you can just focus on one single thing, it's about storytelling. Tell your
Mm-hmm.
story through features, through epics, through stories, through tasks, through documentation, through emails, or simply by talking to others. But storytelling to me is the top thing that you need to practice on.
Yeah, yeah. And Diego, I want to kind of go a little bit more deeper and talk about storytelling. You're doing storytelling, and you talked about influence, right? You have a lot of people to influence. And for the audience who are a little bit new, who haven't worked in a big companies, even, and also going back to our customers, right? People think product managers maybe have to sell to somebody. So what kind of customers, what kind of stakeholders do you have to influence? And like, how do you do that? I'm really curious. Like,
I'll start with the easy part. The easy part is, who do I talk to, or
yeah,
who do I need to influence? And you said it
yes,
right. It's about influencing customers. Whether it's a nice customer or a tough customer, you have to influence them. It's not about
yeah,
selling them your product. It's about showing them the value and saying,
mm-hmm,
um, you have these alternatives. This is what you're doing today. This is what you could be doing.
mm-hmm,
But based on research, again, being data driven, based on our research, this is how much you would be spending.
mm-hmm,
And of course, just to clarify, this type of conversations usually happen with non-disclosure agreements. So it's not something that typically would happen on the open, right? So they
mm-hmm,
know our numbers, we know some numbers, and so it works like that. But anyway, so typically you convince them by again, the empathy, and what the customer cares about is it going to solve my problem, and is it going to be less or more expensive than what I currently have. And if
mm-hmm,
you can attack those 2 points, then you're going to convince your customer
mm-hmm,
uh, of what you want to do. But if your solution is not solving their problem and is even more expensive than one they have,
mm,
there's no way you're going to sell your product to them, right?
got you,
so
got
that's
you.
the so that's the who I talk to or who I need to convince the most. But outside of that, when you think of big organizations, we've got my boss, my boss's boss, the PMs in the other organization, the leads of engineering, data science, finance, marketing,
Mm-hmm,
and so many other groups at Microsoft. How do you
right,
do it? It's very complex, and it goes back to that empathy. Understand
yeah.
what are their motivations, what do they need, and go for those points.
Right. Yeah, and just to kind of make it real for the listeners. So if I want a reporting solution from Microsoft and you're a PM, I for most likely might already exist in the ecosystem of customers. So I'm not like a new customer, like learning it for the first time. I probably have used some services already. So if I show up and I come to you and saying, okay, I'm using these kind of reporting solution. So you would kind of show me, and that you would do by understanding about my needs, and you're really trying to show me how this new feature or product could solve my problems.
Exactly. The first thing that I would do as a product manager with a new customer
Mm-hmm.
who approaches Microsoft, or in this case, my specific product, my solutions, the first
Mm-hmm.
thing that I need to do is I need to understand what is your problem that you can't solve today, or
Mm-hmm.
that you have a solution that may not be efficient, so that I know,
Mm-hmm.
can I solve the problem for you? Is it going to
Mm-hmm.
be better, faster, cheaper? Like, what is the advantage of not only the ecosystem of Microsoft, which yes, that falls into play, but it's also, can I solve that problem for you? Can we do it? And if not, what does it take for us to get there? Or maybe in the end is like, this product is not the right for you, but we have maybe other Microsoft products that can help you with that. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the first thing before even jumping into the sales pitch and what we do and all of that.
Yeah, no, that's great. So I'm gonna pick up stay on the influence and communication skills and caring about your customers and people in the ecosystem that you work with. So you're caring about the developers, you're caring about the stakeholders. So let's go in talking about what does product management looks like in a large enterprise. Like Microsoft is a good example, because a PM for a small startup is very different than like when you are working with probably hundreds of teams. Microsoft has probably hundreds of companies that they've acquired that kind of operate separately, but they maybe there are some connections, right? So a lot of dependencies, a lot of risk. So I'm curious, how do you approach that cross-team collaboration? How do you minimize dependencies? How do you communicate risk? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I would start by saying that I think the biggest difference is that in a large organization like Microsoft, typically the product management role has certain boundaries. Like I know that as much as, in general in product management, you're going to pick up work that sometimes you didn't even know you had to do. But there's a limit to that in my role. And I think that's one key difference. Whereas in a startup, it's typically, hey, whatever it takes, we need to launch the product. So whatever it takes, just do it. Like if you never thought you were going to do some type of documentation and it's needed and nobody else is doing it, the product manager will do it. Whereas in here, in Microsoft or in general in any large company, I know that I can, if I need certain document and I know somebody else is responsible for that, I'll just go and ask for it. So that's one key difference. And then the other is the fact that you have so many people involved in a large organization means that there are certain things where I do have almost all control over the decisions, but then there are others that may be more fundamental to the product and may affect the product in a way that touches multiple parties or multiple groups, and that needs to be that needs to involve 60 people in an email, and that just makes it slow and complicated, right? And I'm not talking about a specific example at Microsoft. I'm talking in general in a large organization. You have all these dependencies. You said it right. So that, to me, those are the two biggest difference. But there are of course nuances and smaller things. But to me, those are like two key things that make it very different.
Yeah, definitely. I'm curious, Diego, how what are kind of agile practices are you using, like Scrum, Kanban, user stories, user story mapping? I'm just curious, what are different practices that you use as a product manager?
Yeah, so I work in one part of Microsoft where, like I said before, we focus on AI and machine learning models, and we develop in an agile way. So we try to do a little bit of as much best practice as we can in a Kanban way. So we use our own tool called Azure DevOps to be able to track all the progress of our development. And the reason why I say we try to do as much as possible from best practices is because we work with data scientists and engineering, and the development and the way things flow when you're talking about AI from a data science development perspective versus engineering perspective goes at a different rhythm. So we're trying to adapt as much. But to go back to answering your question, so we use, I would say most of Agile best practices. Like we have our epics, features, stories, tasks. We make sure that our features, don't spend 2 years of development, but it's rather something achievable in the next couple of months. Stories are typically less than a sprint. We have sprints of 2 weeks. Tasks are done by engineering. If we need to do research, we do spikes. We use backlog groomings and sprint plannings to make sure that everything is staying on board. I think one big lesson learned for me about Agile in the data science and engineering world is that because the times are different, we have to adapt certain processes from data science to Agile, but also certain practices from Agile to data science. Because the most important thing in the end, going back to communication, is making sure that engineering and data science talk the same language in terms of progress and velocity, and that we achieve it through Agile and our stories and our features, and basically just tracking everything in the Kanban board.
Yeah, no, that's great. And while you're there, I'm gonna ask you this question. So like Azure, a lot of companies are starting to use Azure to manage their work or visualize, which is like Jira competitive. So I've never used Azure. So why do you think Azure is a better product than Jira or Rally or other products that exist out there?
So I would say from a product, I'll talk from a product management perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I can't speak from an engineering or data science perspective, but at least from a
Yeah.
product management perspective.
Yeah.
So putting on my Microsoft T-shirt, I
Yeah.
do a lot of reporting in Power BI, and a
Mm.
lot of I do a lot of that. Going sideways a little bit, I do a lot of
Mm-hmm.
that by taking
Mm-hmm.
telemetry from the product, understanding the usage, the customers, like how
Mm-hmm.
our products are being used. And there's a really good integration between Azure DevOps with Power BI, where I simply
Mm-hmm.
take everything that my teams are putting in there, and I just
Mm-hmm.
create reports to see what's the progress, how are we doing, what's missing.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, for example, at the beginning, we were at a point where nobody was logging, story points. So it was like, all right, we've got like 50 stories. What's going on? Like we can't accomplish 50 stories, or we
Right.
sized everything wrong. And so by creating my own dashboard where I can visualize how's the team doing and just pushing them and saying, this is why it's important to track story points. This is why it's important to make sure that stories are achievable within one sprint. Like just by doing all of those things, we achieve a point where now if I go to sprint planning and say, hey, data science, this is what we need from engineering, this is what we need from data science, they
Mm-hmm.
all understand each other. We know if they tell us it's going to be in 2 sprints, we know it's going
Mm-hmm.
to be in 2 sprints. We're not no longer guessing. So to
Mm-hmm.
me, that's the biggest advantage, because I, as a product manager, decided to
Yeah.
create my dashboard. But
Yeah.
we'll have to ask an engineer or a data science
Yeah.
for a more
Yeah.
technical answer.
Definitely. No, no, that's good. That's good. I'll check it out since you recommended it. Good, good. Okay. Well, my other question is, if we somehow got a screenshot of your calendar of the week, which we're not gonna do, but if we were, what kind of meetings and interactions would we see? Just to kind of summarize, like if you can tell a story
Yeah,
about what's happening in a week to week or in a month, what are some things that happens in the product
absolutely.
manager's life?
I think to me that's one of the exciting things about product management, is
Yeah.
that it's always changing. And so
Yeah.
the unfortunate answer or short answer to your question is it depends.
It depends.
Now
Yeah.
it depends on what. Like I said before, depending on if we're doing the ideation phase or
Mm-hmm.
development or prototyping or user
Mm-hmm.
feedback, it will
Mm-hmm.
depend a lot on that, the type of meetings that we're going to have. So like
Mm-hmm.
I could have one week where I meet with a ton of customers to do some research, and we include the user research teams. There's a ton of presentations, or maybe we even spend some time together designing surveys and running those through our users. Or maybe if I'm in development, most of my week would be catching up with data science and engineering to making sure that we're making progress. And then I will have another big meeting with my counterparts in another product, because maybe we're doing some integration. There's a lot of discussion there. There's regular catch ups with the other PMs in my group, with my manager, with the leads of data science and engineering to update the progress. Every now and then we'll have like monthly presentations to leadership team. And so now I need to spend a lot of time on content. And then things can radically shift as we're about to launch a product, because now we're meeting with compliance to make sure that we're doing everything right, with marketing, with sales, with partners to see what content we need to create, with another group of technical folks to help us with the website. And so it really depends on the stage of the project. But I would say 80% of my week is meetings. But the good thing about it, or the thing that I like, is that every meeting or most of the meetings are actually important. It's not like that meme that this meeting
Yeah.
could have been an email. In my case, I think I'm at a point where I reduced the amount of meetings that could have been an email and increased the amount of meetings that are actually to make progress in the development.
Right. Yeah. And then this is not just with the development team. You said like what percent of those meetings is outside of the development team, would you say, if you had to generalize it?
So I would even say that the minimum number of meetings that I have, or the maximum number that I try to have with my development team, is
Mm-hmm.
around 4 or 5 meetings a week.
Okay.
Everything else is either talking with customers, talking with my counterparts in other groups, regular syncs with other PMs and managers to make sure that everything is being tracked, everything's in progress, and we have a open door policy where like people
Mm-hmm.
can ping me in Microsoft Teams, where that's our tool that we use, and ask me questions there, or we put documents there, and we make the communication flow. As you know, Agile, a lot of it is that dialogue, that communication, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we make it flow through there. But I try to
Yeah.
spend at the least amount of time possible with my development team, so
Mm-hmm.
that they have more time to actually do the development and the code and all that. But yeah, most of my meetings are with other folks.
Got you. Got you. So from now, let's just talk more about engineering or development team. Um, so I'm curious, what's your, so you said most of the meetings are outside, stakeholders, other PMs, other folks that you have dependencies with. But once you have that, what are you communicating to the developers? And you can generalize this for product managers, like,
Right.
user stories, priority, backlog. If you can help help kind of people see that, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, so I think there are multiple outcomes that could happen, week to week. Sometimes it could
Mm-hmm.
be, a meeting with heads of engineering on my team, and the other team that I'm working on for integrations. And so the outcome of that could be okay, we have a high level plan, and now it's my job as a PM to start the communication flowing within my team to say, we've got a high level plan. Let's put a
Mm-hmm.
design document together. I'll put the
Mm-hmm.
business reason why we're doing this, and
Mm-hmm.
I need the team's help to go through the technical parts of it. But it could also be, at the end of a customer call to say, okay, I have a customer call. Let me check my data, and if it makes sense, and we need to change priority, then I prepare that for my backlog grooming session,
Mm-hmm.
and just go with the team and say, hey, we've got this requirement. Here's why it's
Mm-hmm.
not a bug; it's a new feature. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
important. Here's why. Here's how it will affect other customers and the product. By when can we start prioritizing this based on the current capacity of the team, right? And start that
Mm-hmm.
dialogue or with the leads of that. And so typically every meeting or most of the meetings end with a call to action. Let's start a document, let's create the story, let's change a feature, let's put in the next meeting, but now with a broader team. And so there's always something else that happens after those meetings.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And then obviously, so once all that is done, and then they create the work, you're probably also reviewing the work and giving feedback, and also like showing that are you also demoing that product feature that they made to the customers, or?
Yeah, absolutely. And every time I have a regular sync with my team, we check on the progress, right? And whether the
Mm-hmm.
progress is simply like, oh, we're debugging this part of the code, or we're debugging this issue, or hey, here's a major progress. We ran some models. Here are the results, the comparison, what's not. And once
Mm-hmm.
we are confident that we have enough to show our customers,
Mm-hmm.
first we do sort of like internal demos where we show some of the leads, like, hey, this is what we're presenting to the customers. And then
Mm-hmm.
we talk with the customers and also say, hey, here's some initial results, here are some next steps. And then it depends. Sometimes proof of concepts, these POCs will last a couple of weeks, a couple of months, depending on, we're not the only ones involved in those proof of concepts. And so every week or every couple of weeks, we would show to the customers, here's the progress, until we hit that mark and end of the end of the POC. And now it's time to wrap it up and just deliver what was promised to the customers, and we'll take the lessons learned and continue development through that.
Nice, nice. Yeah, that actually gives us puts us in a very good space to talk about minimum viable product and setting out hypothesis. How do you set up your hypothesis for the development team, or how do you do as a team?
Absolutely. The hypothesis starts for us with thinking, okay, we have this product, and I'm going to make completely made up example. Would we have this product, let's say Microsoft Teams, right? It's a
Mm-hmm.
communication tool. And we start hearing from customers because we hear it through forums, or we are running surveys or interviews, and we're just asking open questions to the users to see okay, what things are missing in Microsoft Teams, right? And we start with that hypothesis by collecting the feedback or even the telemetry from the product and saying, you know what, people are actually not turning on their camera as much as we thought they would. So there's
Yeah.
something, let's explore that. And we do interviews about it. And that's where we
Mm-hmm.
start getting that feedback from customers. And that's something that product managers together with UX research that we do, in conjunction. And
Mm-hmm.
once we get the data back, then we say, okay, so there's clearly something happening here, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's, customers don't like it, customers don't actually like their background, maybe we're not blurring or not providing, enough um, user generated backgrounds for them to use, which by the way we do, but this is just a
Yeah.
hypothetical scenario.
Yeah.
And so we do that kind of experimentation or that hypothesis experimentation. Once we know, okay, this is what we're going to go with, we need to get the buy-in from different stakeholders, like the
Mm-hmm.
business reason why. So typically managers, then engineering, then data science, and saying, this is what we heard from customers, here's where we need to take the product next. And then
Mm-hmm.
that negotiation of timelines and the cost is going to start, and then we'll start development. But hypothesis starts with product management and user conversation.
Nice. No, thanks for that. And I'm not gonna ask you why we should use Teams over Microsoft Teams over other video platforms. Another conversation. Uh, so great. Okay, well that brings us to a prioritization question. So when you think about prioritization, and this is probably hundreds of people are asking you this, what's your model for prioritizing work for the development team?
Right. So when it comes to how do product managers prioritize, I get this question a lot, and every time they ask me a question, they tell me, "Did you use X, Y, or Z framework?" And I'm like, I don't even know those frameworks because we use those frameworks mostly when you are interviewing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and here's the reason why. I think frameworks are a great place to start. They will give you like the ideas like, oh, you should prioritize based on, are you gonna have a wow factor for your customers, or is it more of a need, or is it more of a you're migrating to a new technology. So there are tons of frameworks to help you, and it's
Mm-hmm.
a starting point. But here's the thing: there are so many people that are going to influence you as a product manager in priorities that you need to take everything with a grain of salt and balance everybody's opinion. And I'll give you an example. Let's say there's another Microsoft product, or whatever the company is, but there's another product that comes to you and says, hey, we would love to integrate with you, and we see an opportunity that is going to increase our products combined in $500 million. If you
Mm-hmm.
have your roadmap planned, it's very unlikely that you're going to say, no, you know what? I have my roadmap. I can't make that happen, because in the end, it's going to be a win-win situation. So that's going to change your roadmap. Now, let's assume a customer comes to you and says, hey, I would love to buy your product, but it's missing 3 features. And I want those
Mm-hmm.
3 features before the end of the year. And I'm going to purchase $500 million in licenses. So that's
Yeah.
also going to affect your backlog, right, and your priorities. And then you're going to
Mm-hmm.
have your own internal priorities based on the hypothesis that research that you did, the customer interviews. And so there are just so many complexities to a large organization like Microsoft or like Cisco or Google or Apple or any other large company that you can think of, that
Mm-hmm.
prioritizing is not just, let me put a framework together and that's how I'll prioritize. Is you have to balance what other people are saying
Mm-hmm.
and combine that with your research and being that data driven constantly, and saying, here's all the data and all the reasons why this is the priority that we'll have for our backlog. And your backlog is going to change anyways in the next couple of weeks, months, or yeah, I wouldn't even say year, but in the next months it's going to change
Yeah.
definitely.
No, thank you. Thank you for answering that. And I'm just really curious, like, what's the most challenging part of being a PM?
People are the most challenging thing about being a product manager. People are
Yeah.
hard, people are unpredictable, some people are nice, some people are bad, and there's nothing you can do about it. Your job as a product manager is to interact with people all the time. When you're not interacting with people, you're helping your team with probably some documents or
Mm-hmm.
preparing for another meeting with more people. But people are the hardest thing about being a product manager, in my opinion. Remember the storytelling that I keep talking about. You're preparing
Yeah.
stories to convince people of doing something.
Yeah. I hear you. I hear you. So, um, so talking about people, so what are some effective communication ways? Like, how do you make sure to communicate effectively with stakeholders? So let's say this might be for new product managers when they're thinking about communication. What should they know about effective communication?
Right. I think it goes back to one of the things that I was saying about empathy and
Mm-hmm,
understanding the other people, right? And I'll give you a
mm-hmm,
concrete example. I don't know if you have met or your audience has met many folks in sales, but typically they are overwhelmed with stuff that they need to get done, and talking to customers and doing research and preparing presentations and hearing complaints, but also hearing changes in the structure and what's not. So they have 10 seconds for you. If you
mm-hmm,
write them an email that is 5 paragraphs explaining why the customer is wrong, and here's
mm-hmm.
all the evidence, very
Yeah.
likely you're not going to be communicating well with the sales guys, right?
Mm-hmm,
You have to
mm-hmm,
be very efficient, and be very conscious of their time, and
mm-hmm,
making sure that the way you are communicating with them, it's something
mm-hmm,
that is going to benefit you, benefit the sales guys, benefit the customer. And again, this doesn't mean making the customer happy. It means if they need an answer of why something is failing,
mm-hmm,
here's why and here's the reason and here are 3 lines of why. If you need more information, like, let me know and we can set up something. But you have to always be conscious about that, in the same
mm-hmm,
way that if you tell engineering, hey, we need a blue button, that's
mm-hmm,
not enough. You have to understand, okay, they're going to need so many details to make sure
mm-hmm,
that we go to the agile practices of
mm-hmm,
the acceptance criteria, and
mm-hmm,
making sure that when something's done, you need all those things flushed out. And that's how you can be an effective communicator. Think of what the other person, their motivations are, how much time they have to read your email or have for your phone call, and just think of what's the best way to communicate with them. Put yourselves in the shoes of others.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that. And this will probably be our last question, Diego. So the last question is, um, you gave us some really good insights in terms of what is product management, core skill sets, what does product management look like in a large organization, the practices, the agile practices that you use. You help us understand prioritization, week to week, different meetings, and how to communicate. So um, apart from these, let's say if I was to go into product management, if I wanted to become a product manager at a large company like Microsoft or Amazon, how should I prepare?
The first thing that you have to do is
Mm-hmm.
understand to the core what is product management. and
Mm-hmm.
and I gave you some information today, and there's so much out
Yes.
there to read. And
Mm-hmm.
you can also think about, once you understand product management, that you need to understand, okay, if you don't have what we call a traditional background, which typically is a technical background, that you can simply say, okay, I've done product management in a technical way. Then you have to understand what are those transferable skills that you can bring from your own experience into
Mm-hmm.
product management. And all of this, what I'm talking about, is even before saying prepare your resume, prepare for interviews. This is about understanding the fundamentals of product management and how
Mm-hmm.
all the skills and everything that you have as experience can translate
Mm-hmm.
into product management. And if you don't have those skills, if you don't have that experience, there are great ways to actually build that experience outside of work, outside of school, as a side project, to tell the interviewers and tell the company like Microsoft, saying, hey, here's what I'm doing, and here's all the extra things that I do to prove that I can be a fantastic product manager. And
Mm.
all of this, like you said at the beginning, I have my own YouTube channel where I talk a lot about these things, and
Mm-hmm.
help guys or people who are listening to this podcast on how to transition into product management. So
Yeah.
make sure to check it out, guys.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Yeah, you have some really good interview preparation questions that I found it very insightful. So definitely not only learning about product management, which through the podcast, I actually took away a lot. But from like a preparation for the interview questions, you've done a great job. Any books or resources that you have in mind? that you would have, or are you just planning on writing one? Are you going to make all the video series of stuff?
So definitely, like I said, go to my channel. You can find me as PM Diego Granados.
Yes.
I don't have any plans yet for a book, but it's a great suggestion. I'll keep it in mind.
Yes.
No, but I think when I was learning about product management, there was one book out there that really helped me understand much more about what a product manager does. It also
Mm-hmm.
talks a little bit about preparing for interviews and even technical questions, but to really understand, okay, this is what a product manager does at different types of companies. Cracking the
Mm-hmm.
PM interview,
Mm-hmm.
cracking
Perfect.
cracking the PM interview. You'll find it's this very orange popular book. I think everybody who is getting into product management either has it or is planning to buy it. It's one of those books where if you have no clue about product management, it will take you all the way into understanding this is what's product management.
Absolutely. Diego, it was a pleasure talking to you. I actually learned so much about product management, and especially at a large company like Microsoft. And thank you so much for sharing all the examples. And you didn't really hold any information back. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Diego.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Vivek. And thanks everyone for listening. And best of luck. If you're planning to get into product management, stay in touch.
Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. We'll be sure to come back with more exciting videos on Agile topics.